Welcome back everyone. In this video, I'm going to be covering three-way switching with Shelly devices. If you're tired of the limitations of traditional three-way switch wiring, then you're in the right place. I'll be showing you how to upgrade your home lighting with the help of Shelly devices using the typical wiring you find in homes with three-way switches. For those who are unaware, three-way switching allows you to control a light from two different locations, such as a hallway and a staircase. However, traditional three-way switch wiring can be tricky to navigate. With Shelly devices, however, the process becomes much easier and more convenient. In this video, I'll walk you through the process of changing out the traditional three-way switch with a single gang switch and wiring in the Shelly devices. You can also use this method to turn regular switches around your house into three-way switches. So let's get started. Okay, so before we get into this, let's have a look at the requirements that we're going to need for making this happen. So aside from Home Assistant, we're going to need the following hardware, which is Shelly devices, and in this case we will need 3, and some single gang switches. Now, as far as Home Assistant goes, the version that I am running, if we go down to our settings here and then click on About, you can see that I'm running the latest Home Assistant version, and I'll just make that a little bit bigger. So there you can see the latest version of Home Assistant that I am running. Okay, so first thing we're going to have to do is disconnect the traditional three-way switch wiring. The traditional three-way switch wiring is going to be replaced with a single gang switch as our first step in upgrading our three-way switching to use Shelly devices. This is a straightforward process, but it's important to follow all safety guidelines and seek professional help if you're unsure about any part of it. To change out the switch, you will need to turn off the power to the circuit at the main electrical panel. This is an important safety step to prevent an electrical shock while working on the wiring. Once the power is off, you can remove the cover plate from the switch from the electrical box where the switch is installed. Next, we need to identify the different wires in the box. A three-way switch has 4 wires, which consist of a common wire, 2 traveler wires, and 1 ground wire. And the neutral wire is generally not connected to the switch. Once you've identified the wires, you can disconnect the switch in preparation for the single gang switch and Shelly device. As I mentioned, it's important to note that the wiring configuration may differ from one home to another, so it's important to check your wiring first, and you may need assistance from an electrician to identify these wires. You need to know which switch has the wire that goes to the load or the light, and which switch has the wire that is the line or came from your electrical panel. By disconnecting the traditional three-way switch, you're now ready to wire the single gang switches and Shelly devices. This will allow you to control your lights from multiple locations and even remotely with your phone, laptop, or even voice commands if you have that set up. Okay, so wiring in the single gang and Shelly devices. This process is relatively simple and straightforward, but it's important to follow all safety guidelines as I mentioned and seek professional help where you're unsure about any part of this process. It's important to connect the wires according to the diagram that comes with the Shelly devices. This diagram will show you how to connect the wires to the Shelly devices, which indicates which wire goes where. But if you've lost that little piece of paper, no worries. We'll just head over to their website and I'll show you where you can find that information. So if we go to Shelly's main website here and we click on Support and Knowledge and then click on Overview, if we scroll down here under Knowledge Base, if we just click Knowledge Base, it's going to bring us up to another page, and here we just want to click on Devices, and I'm using the Shelly Gen 1 device, so I'm currently using in this setup for this demonstration 2 Shelly 1s and 1 Shelly PM. So if we click on the Shelly 1 for example, and we scroll down, we can see the basic wiring diagrams. So we're going to be following this AC wiring, and they also have a legend that tells you what these individual symbols mean and how we're going to set up our switch. So let's go over the wiring in your home and how it will most likely be arranged. As I said, there's no guarantee that this is the way it is. There are 3 legal configurations that your wiring may be in, and this is just the most common, which is why I mentioned hiring an electrician. Okay, so if we go to my diagram here, we can see that this is how a traditional 3-way switch would be set up. These lines up here just represent the wires traveling between the boxes. The light blue color here is just representative of the white wire, which is the neutral wire. So here you have your power, and your power is going to come in on the black wire to the switch, and the white wire is going to be moretted to carry through all the way to the light. So the wires that travel between the boxes, between the switches, is 3-wire cable, and it will have a black, a white, and a red. The black and the red are typically the traveler wires, and you'll see those connected on the switch. And sometimes switches will tell you which wires are the traveler wires, but you should see the white wire moretted together that continues on from the power source to the first box, to the second box, to your outlet box. And finally, the last switch that goes from the wires that go from the switch to the light, again, is a 2-wire, a black and a white. And this is the most common configuration that we see. And this is what I mean by identifying which one is the load. This wire here that goes to the light is the load wire. And this one on this side, this black one, is the line, which comes from your power. So we're going to take this configuration and we're going to turn it into this. So our single gang switches are really not going to switch anything except for turn the Shelly device relay on or off. So what we have to do is connect our black wire from our power in our first box, just like the white wire was above, how it was connected through all the way through the light. We're going to do the same thing and connect a black wire all the way through to the light, and the white wire should stay the same. Now I'm using red here just to signify a different color. It could be a black wire, but this is going to be a jumper wire that you install, and the red wire that was running between the 2 switches we're just not going to use. It's going to be gone. So we're going to pigtail our hot wire or our line or our power at each box, and that is what is going to power our Shelly device on. So I'll just zoom in here. So we can see that our neutral wire comes in on our neutral, our power wire comes in on our line, and it also continues up to the switch. And then depending on the configuration of your switch, power will then travel back down onto the switch side of the Shelly device, which will turn the relay in the Shelly on or off. And that wiring is the same for each switch. Now when we come over to the light, what we have is our power coming into our line and our neutral coming into neutral. We also have power coming into the eye or the input on the Shelly, and another wire going from the output of the Shelly to the light. We also require the neutral going to our light. So as I say, in this configuration, without your setup in Home Assistant, turning these light switches on and off is not going to do anything. This light will not turn on or off without our automation. Okay, So we have everything all wired up in our boxes, but before we go ahead and mount our light switches in place, we're just going to leave them hanging out like a Frankenstein project. And this is just to make sure that our Shelly devices are working before we proceed and button everything up, just so that we don't have to take everything apart again. Just make sure to tell everyone that the devices will be live, so no one touches anything they shouldn't and gets hurt. Now it's time to configure them. Setting up the Shelly devices is a simple process that can be done using the Shelly app, which is available for both iOS and Android devices, or you can also edit this configuration from the web portal as I'm about to show you. If you are going the phone app route, you will need to download it from the App Store or Google Play. My devices are already configured to my Wi-Fi. If yours are not, when you power up the Shelly device for the first time, it's going to broadcast a Wi-Fi access point similar to this. So you just have to connect to that Wi-Fi access point, which you can do again from your phone or computer, and then navigate to the default IP address of 192.168.33.1, and that is where you will see the Shelly portal where you can configure it to connect to your home's Wi-Fi. So with mine, if we see, mine is already connected to my Wi-Fi, which we can see here. So just so you can see what that portal looks like, I'm just going to hit configure and I'm going to submit. And if you want to give it an area, you can, but I'm not for now. So that portal is going to look just like this. So the first thing you're going to come to is Internet and Security, and then you're going to click on the Wi-Fi mode of client, and then you will connect your Wi-Fi. You'll hit save. I highly recommend that you set a static IP address for these devices so that if anything relies on the IP address as far as automations go, if you lose power and these things turn back on, they don't lose that IP address and will always work for you at that IP address. Another thing that you may notice is that when you first get your device, the firmware may need to be updated. And there'll be a little icon on the settings here. And then if you come into the settings, you'll see the firmware update. You'll click on this, check for new firmware, and it will download that new firmware to your device. And typically, if you get this set up on your Wi-Fi and you don't see it being brought into Home Assistant, even though it's getting an IP address, it's typically because the firmware needs to be updated. So once your Shelly devices are all set up, you can configure them to suit your needs. The app allows you to control the lights, and this is what I mean by the app or the app on your phone. You can set schedules, you can set timers, you can even give input-output URL actions, so that's if you want this specific Shelly device to turn on another one, you would be able to use webhooks to do that. And you can send commands. So on one of the other Shelly devices, I can enter in its webhook and add it so that every time that Shelly device turns on, it turns on the light, which is what you can see that I've got set up here. And that's just in case Home Assistant goes down, that my lights still work without Home Assistant. It's just going to talk to, the Shelly devices are just going to talk to each other. So we'll just go back and get our devices imported. So you can see that I've named mine Light Switch 1 and Switch 2, and that is over here on the settings. For the device name, you can just give it whatever device name you want and then hit save. And as I said, you can power these on and off from the app, or what we're going to do now is bring it into Home Assistant. So now that we have them in Home Assistant, let's just look at a little demonstration of, without an automation, what happens with this light. Alright, so as you can see, if I turn this switch on, nothing is happening with the light. But if I go to the Shelly light here and go to the device, I can turn it on from Home Assistant. I could also, from the Shelly itself, once it loads up, I can also turn the light on and off. Okay, so perfect. Now we should have full control over our lights with the convenience of controlling them from anywhere at any time with just a touch of a finger. These Shelly devices can also integrate with other smart devices, such as those you'll find from Amazon or Google, and that is where voice commands can come into play here. So we have them integrated into Home Assistant. Okay, so let's automate this. So from our light, we're just going to click on Automation, and I want to turn the light on or off. Except I don't want it as a trigger, so I'm just going to delete that. So I want this light to toggle, and my triggers are going to be state changes here. And the first entity that we're going to pick is our switch. So our light switch 1 and our switch 2. And then hit save. We'll just call this three-way test and hit save. So now, oh, I apologize. I actually don't want this second one in here. I actually want a second trigger for state, and here I will put it under a second trigger. And hit save. So what I want to have happen is when light switch 1 changes or light switch 2 changes, to toggle the light. So if we go over to our light now with that automation running and we toggle, we can see that our switches operate just like a three-way device. So, use cases. Alright, so I already know this, and you may be wondering, why would I do this when there are other products on the market that can straight up replace your traditional switches with smart switches? And while that is true, and I do use them in my home, namely the TP-Link CASA devices, this is all highly dependent on your use case, or if you want to use these devices. TP-Link CASA requires a neutral. These require a neutral as well. However, the TP CASAs require you to connect to their cloud. They don't have the ability to use MQTT like Shelly's do out of the box, and I love that about them. And most importantly, as I already hinted at, was they're local. You don't need to use their cloud component. So offhand, you may not be switching out your three-way switches for this setup, but if you want to add three-way switching to a single switched light, for example, with this method, you can pull power from a nearby outlet install a new electrical box and a switch, add your Shelly in like we saw in this configuration, and now you have a light that is controllable from 2 locations without having to do any heavy intensive wiring. Or you might not have a Christmas light outlet outside your house, but you do have a plug and you want to control that plug with a switch. Well, with this setup you can do that. Also, I know that this may be expensive, and honestly, cost shouldn't be an issue as we're in the home automation game. Anything other than traditional devices is going to cost more. So let's do a little bonus here of Node Red. There's one thing that bothers me about this setup, and that's in a power outage situation. As is, Home Assistant cannot store the last known state easily, but with Node Red you can. Unfortunately for me, I wasn't smart enough to get Node Red to work as a traditional 3-way switch. I can get one switch to work fine, and I use persistent storage to hold the state of the device so that when power is restored, it goes back to that state. So I thought I would ask you all, or challenge all of you, to see who can build a Node Red flow that can accomplish this. I will leave my flow for a single switch with persistent storage on my GitHub page as a starter, and I look forward to seeing what you amazing people can accomplish. And again, your 3-way switch should be able to operate in Node Red on a change of status, so that flicking either of the switches in either direction turns the light on or off. In Node Red, I can only get the 3-way to work in this way, where one switch has to be turned on or off to turn on the light, and then if I go over to this light, I have to do 2 switches to get it to work, and it doesn't work the way it's working here. So let's have a brief look at how this looks with my Node Red flow with a single switch. Okay, so let's import my flow. Okay, so I have to come into the palette and I have to install the Shelly Config package here. Yeah, I was testing this on my home production setup. So there we go. We'll just get rid of this flow. Alright, so let's just shrink this down to see a little bit more space. So there we can see the switch. It's checking the state and either turning the light on or off, and this persistent storage here will keep the light turning on or off. So I'm just going to deploy that, and I have to go back to Home Assistant, to Automations, and I'm just going to disable this for now. And we'll go back to Node Red here, and I'll actually just delete that link and go deploy and just show you. So just to show you that there's no funny business going on right now, nothing happens, the light stays on. But if I come back here and reconnect this and hit deploy, now if I switch the light on or off, it works. This other switch isn't doing anything because I've disabled it. So there we have our on or off. Now to show you here, we have our power plugged in. And if I disconnect the power the light goes off. But when I plug the power back in, it didn't work. So something must be wrong with my processed state. So let's just redeploy that. And try that one more time. So with power on, and I unplug, and I plug it back in. Of course it's not working for me, but I did have it working. It's just the nature of the beast. Oh, there we go. It took a while to process that. So it does remember the last state and it turns back on. Now, to show you that in Home Assistant, let's disconnect our process state and our switch. We'll redeploy that. And you'll see that now turning these on or off, again, does nothing. But if I come back to Home Assistant and go to my automations and I re-enable this automation, it's now working. So if I have the light on and I disconnect the power, when I restore power, the light remains off. We'll give it a brief minute of time here to show you, but the light is not going to come back on. So today I've shown you how to upgrade your three-way switching to use Shelly devices. We've covered the process of replacing the traditional three-way switch with a single gang switch and wiring in the Shelly devices. I've also shown you how to set up and configure the Shelly devices using the app and how to integrate them into Home Assistant. If you follow these steps, you'll be able to upgrade your three-way switching or any light and switch in your home and enjoy the convenience of being able to control your lights or a plug from more than one place or even remotely with your phone, laptop, or voice commands if your setup allows for that. It's crucial to keep in mind that a licensed electrician should always perform any work on electrical wiring. If you're unsure of any of this process, please seek professional help. I hope this has been helpful and provided you with the information you need to upgrade your three-way switching with Shelly devices. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the comments section. And there you have it, folks. You're now officially a Shelly switch master. With your new smart switch setup, you can finally tell your friends that you're living in the future. Enjoy lighting up your life one switch at a time. As always, I hope this video has been informative and helpful. Also, always remember to follow safety guidelines and seek professional help if necessary. Goodbye.